Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how I created these little pouches for my sewing and embroidery bobbins. Now, some time ago on my channel I made one of these little pouches. I made the smallest size. It was tiny. It was about maybe 2.5 inches wide, something like that, and only so high. And I'm using it in my car to keep a little bit of change in, so that if I ever need some car parking change, I've got, a couple of pounds in there. And I think I said at the time, this is a free embroidery file from Creative Fabrica, and it comes in, I think it's small, medium, large and extra large, 4 sizes, and I did the smallest size at the time. Now, also some time ago, you may have seen me do some vinyl and put them on the little plastic pouches that you get with your sewing machine. But there must be some kind of coating on that plastic pouch, because the vinyl just won't stick at all. Every time I go in the drawer to pull my little container out that's got my bobbins in it, I find another letter peeling off, and it was getting on my nerves. So I decided that this little simple pouch would hopefully do the job as a replacement. So I opened up, I think, as I say, I think this is the large size, but I will put it on screen. But it might be that this is either the medium or the large, I can't remember, but I will put it on screen when I edit the video. So I opened up the file in Embrilliance Essentials and I added the word sewing and embroidery. And then obviously I stitched them out. The whole process of stitching the pouch out is so simple. It literally is, I think, 4 steps. But if you want to know how I did this and how I added the text in Embrilliance Essentials, keep watching. Okay, so I'm in Embrilliance Essentials and I've got the file saved on my desktop, and it is the large size that I've used. So as I said, this file is a free file from Creative Fabrica. If you're not already a member, I'll leave you a link where I think you can just go and purchase this individual file, but I will also leave a link to Creative Fabrica so that if you want to join, once you've joined, you can then download anything at all for free from that website. All the information will be in the accompanying blog post for this project over on my Apple Lover 53 website. So I'm going to just drag and drop the file into my Embrilliance Essentials. Now I would add, you can do this directly on your embroidery machine. You would just need to have your Word as a stitch file and get that onto your machine, and then using the forward and backwards function on your machine you could add the words, but I just find it easier to do in Embrilliance Essentials. Just to make this easier for me to work out, the first thing I did was selected the design and I rotated it. It just, for me, makes it easier to work out how this is going to stitch out. So I've selected the large design. I would also add, I have my 8 by 12 hoop selected. I'm going to come up here to the top of the page where the rotating arrows are, and I'm going to rotate this design twice to the right. I put my text along here, and for me visually it just works to have it orientated this way, but to stitch it out I will rotate it back. You don't have to do that, if you can work out the orientation, then just do it how you want to do it. But for me, this is just kind of how my mind works and how I prefer to do this. So I've got the design on my mat and I've got it selected, and I'm just going to move it over to the left hand side. Then I'm going to make sure it's selected. I'm going to right click and hit copy, and I'm going to right click and hit paste. And that puts a duplicate directly on the top, and then I'm just going to put the other one to the right hand side of this hoop. So this line here, this dotted line here, is about the middle of the hoop. I'm just going to drag an imaginary box around both of them. I'm going to come up to the align icon and I'm just going to align them along the top and hit apply and close. And then with them both selected, I'm just going to scoot them up a little bit so I've got room at the top of my hoop and I've got room at the bottom of my hoop. I've got room in the middle for when I want to cut these, you know, out, and I've got room on either side of the hoop, which looks as though I might just scoot it over a little bit. So that's my two designs. So now I'm going to come up to the text letter at the top, click the A, and that will bring on ABC, which is like the default that comes on with Embrilliance when you choose the text. Over here on the right hand side, I'm going to highlight the ABC and I'm going to type the word sewing and hit enter. So that's now changed the ABC to the word sewing. Then under where it says font, I'm going to come down and I'm just going to choose a font. Now, I think I can't remember whether I chose an inch or 3/4 of an inch. I may have chosen an inch for the word sewing and 3/4 for the word embroidery. I can't remember, but just for this process, I'm just going to stick with 3/4 of an inch. So you have to kind of click on some stitches to move your word around. I can see some little lines here, which is where the bottom half of the pouch goes on. So it's going to fold along there. So I want to make sure that this word is going to be kind of central-ish to the front of the flap and not too near where that fold line is going to be. So you can see when I start to drag the word sewing, a blue dash line appears, and that's where you fold your flap over. So I think that kind of looks about right. So again, I'm going to select the text icon, and then this time I'm going to type the word embroidery and hit enter. And again, I'm just going to select the word and drag it over. Now that is too big, so maybe I used 1/2 inch. Okay, so I think what I probably did, I probably used 1/2 inch for the word embroidery, and I think I kind of dragged it down a little bit to make it a similar height, but the word sewing I did at 3/4 of an inch. So 3/4 of an inch for the word sewing and 1/2 inch for the word embroidery, but I have just manipulated it a little bit. Again, you know, it's not vital, it's just going to be a pouch to store some bobbins. But this is kind of the process that I worked through. Now what I wanted to do, I wanted to stitch all the placement lines for both shapes, then the tack down, then the marker point for where you would put the back on. Then I wanted to do the embroidery. So if I go to the stitch simulator, which is the needle at the top of the screen, you'll see at the moment this is how it will stitch out. So it will stitch the placement line for the pouch on the left, then it will stitch the tack down for the pouch on the left, then it wants to stitch the back of the pouch on, and then it's going to jump over to the one on the right and do the same, repeat, and then it's going to start doing the text, and I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to come up to the top of the page to utility, and I'm going to go colour sort, and I'm going to let it sort it automatically, and I'm going to choose new view. Now when I go to the stitch simulator and start to drag the icon along, you'll see now it's going to stitch the placement on the left, the placement on the right, then it's going to do the tack down on the left and the tack down on the right. Then it's going to stitch the back of the pouch on, which I could do it that way, but I didn't. I'll just show you in a minute. And then it's going to go on to the text. So for this particular design, it doesn't really matter if I stitch the back on before the text, because the text is going on the flap and it's not affected by the back of the design. But I wanted to kind of do it in the order that I would normally do it. So in other words, I want the tack downs done, I want the basting stitch done, I want the little placement lines done, then I want my text doing, and then I can remove the whole thing from the hoop and I can turn it over and I can position the vinyl on the back and have it tack that into place. So to do that, I'm going to come over to the right hand side into this kind of layers panel, and I use a Mac, so it says number 1 and there's a tiny picture of the design. And if I click on that arrow, if you use Windows it might be a plus, you'll see there are my basting stitches highlighted, they're my tack downs, that's the back pocket, and here's the words. Now I want to put the words before I add the final section for the back. So I'm going to select the word. Because I've colour sorted the design, it's selecting both words at the same time. And then while it's selected, if I right click and say move earlier, it moves it before that last step. So now if I run the stitch simulator, it's doing the placement stitch, then it's doing the tack down, so then it's doing the tack down, and then it's just going to put my little mark, which is the placement for the back section, then it's going to stitch the words, then I can stop the machine, take the hoop out, place the vinyl on the back of the hoop, tape it down and stitch the last step. So that's how I created the file in Embrilliance Essentials. Now, one last step I did, I'm just going to shrink the hoop down a little bit. I dragged an imaginary box around everything, and from memory I rotated the whole design left twice. And that way, when my hoop goes into my sheet, my embroidery machine, which goes in along this edge, the words stitched out like this. So it doesn't matter. It just kind of, I think for my eye, made it look better. So from here, I went up to the top of the page and I chose File, Save Stitch File. I saved it onto a USB stick, and I put that into my embroidery machine and stitched it out. So that's the bit that you're going to see next. So I have the USB stick loaded into the side of my machine, and I've pulled up the design, which you can see here on the screen in the orientation that it was in Embrilliance. I've got my 8x12 hoop in the machine loaded with some tearaway stabilizer, and now I'm just going to let the machine stitch out the placement step for where the vinyl will be positioned. So that step has been stitched, and now I'm just measuring the basting stitch to see how big I need to cut my piece of vinyl or pieces of vinyl. So for the vinyl that I wanted to use for the main section, I already had a scrap cut, so I ended up just cutting one other piece to a similar size, and I'm positioning both these pieces over the basting stitch that the machine has just done for both of the pouches. I'm going to put the foot down and press start, and I'm going to stitch step number 2. So that's completed step number 2 on both pieces of vinyl. Step number 3 is literally a couple of stitches that it puts down on the side so you know where to line up your vinyl. But I don't know if there's a fault in this file because it only literally puts a stitch on one side of the design. But you can see where to place your vinyl, so it's not a great issue. For the next step, I'm just bringing the hoop towards me ever so slightly so that I can measure from that little mark down to the bottom so I know the width and height of the piece of vinyl that I need to be cutting that is then used in the last step, and I can be cutting that while it's stitching out my text. That's the design all finished now, so I'm going to remove it from the hoop and I'm going to just take it over to my other desk. I'm going to position the 2 pieces of vinyl on the back. I'm going to hold them down with some masking tape, and then I can put the hoop back into the machine and stitch the last step. So I'm just showing you here that I've taped the 2 pieces in place with some masking tape. Now do be careful when you're using tape, and just make sure that when you put your hoop back into your machine that nothing moves underneath. When my second design started stitching out, I heard a funny noise and it was the masking tape, so I was able to quickly stop the machine, and basically the masking tape on the section that says embroidery had started to lift up and it was bending the vinyl underneath. If I hadn't have noticed it, it would have stitched incorrectly. So just be very, very careful when you are using tape and things on the underside of your hoop. So that's the design all finished. I'm going to take it out of the machine, take it over to my other desk, and now start to pull away all the stabilizer and apply the snaps. So I'm going to unhoop it, get the hoops out of the way, and I'm going to pull away all the stabilizer the way I showed you in the video that I did several weeks or months ago when I stitched this out in a kind of miniature size. And then I'm going to trim around the edges. Now I use a quilter's ruler and I line my 1/8 mark up against the external stitch line and then cut with a rotary cutter so that I know that I've got an exact 1/8 of an inch all the way around the design. Okay, so that's the 2 of them all trimmed up now, and this is how they're going to look when the flaps are folded over. So all I need to do now is mark the placement for my snap, which I put around about 5/8 or so of an inch up from the point. I mark it faintly with the pointy tool that came with my snap kit, and just position the snaps on both of the pouches, and then they're completed. So that's the first one done. I'll link to the other video where I made the small pouch because I went through that a lot slower, showing you how to measure for the snaps and what, what snaps you need and that kind of thing. But for this one now, I'm just popping the bobbins in and closing it up, and then I'm just going to repeat the same on the second pouch. And here they both are now completed. I'll try and put a better photograph at the end for you because the colour is not coming over as nice as they appear in real life. As I say, this is a free file from Creative Fabrica, which will be linked in the accompanying blog post here on my website. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know, leave a comment and let me know if you'll try the project or if you've already tried it. Please give the video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.